My mother had me just 5 months shy of her 40th birthday. With 3 older children and a restaurant that sat 300, I conveniently arrived on a Friday night fish fry. The fact that my parents let the waitresses at our restaurant name me is proof they were tired. My mother managed the bookkeeping and occasionally hostessed at our restaurant on busy days, but she was primarily a stay-at-home mom. I say this with recognition. I know how fortunate I am to have grown up in a house where my mother made sure her children were dressed appropriately for the weather, which to her meant turtlenecks in every print available, and yes, they were always tucked in. I know that we were given breakfast every morning before school, and that if I stalled just long enough, she'd become so frazzled I could eat anything I wanted, like ice cream with Rice Krispies on top. It's not every family who gets lovingly woken up from bed by a disco light show as she sought to rouse her 4 children by flicking the upstairs hall light on and off. Flip, 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 flip. There are perks to being raised by an older mom. There are fewer rules and more lenient curfews, because let's face it, she couldn't hear me coming in anyway. And there are downsides to having an older mother, like being the only middle school girl who's caught using phrases like phooey, or taking driving lessons with someone who was born before seatbelts, so if you stopped suddenly, she'd thwack you in the chest with her arm. My mother and I are more alike than I care to admit. We both have red hair, we both buy commemorative postage stamps. And much to my husband's dismay, I've inherited that arm thing in the car. My mother is whip smart and knows it too. Years of reading mystery novels and filling out crossword puzzles in the newspaper have made it possible to solve any crime show she's ever watched well before the show was over. And her vocabulary is double the sum of my entire family's combined, which isn't saying a whole lot as my own father spelled my name wrong on multiple birthday cakes. But trust me, she's good. My mother has long been a letter writer. For years, she was the sunshine captain for the local ladies' church group, which meant she sent out the birthday cards, the get well notes, and the sympathy or congratulatory messages as needed. She is one of those women who writes the kind of Christmas card that has a well-thought-out theme to it. When I moved out and went to college, she often wrote me letters. They were the only mail I got besides bills, and they came in her perfect, impeccable cursive script. Of course, even before opening them, I already knew every paragraph of information inside, since she usually called minutes before the mail came and told me everything on the phone. My mom is a storyteller, family historian, and one-woman neighborhood watch. She's been known to go so long on the phone, my siblings and I have, on occasion, stepped away from the call to use the restroom and returned without her ever noticing a gap on the other end. Sorry. Still, her letters to me in college were a treat, and like the dutiful daughter I was, I wrote back. Nearly every week, she sent me a letter. The envelopes were stuffed with newspaper clippings of stories about my former classmates or magazine articles she thought I might like. But interwoven between the news of Dad's cake business and what book she was now reading was spelling and grammar advice for me. By the way, Jessica, you wrote in your last letter collaborate when I think you meant to use corroborate. And you also spelled irregardless incorrectly. You used 1 R and there should be 2. I blinked at the paper in my hands. My mother was proofreading my letters home. What parent writes their youngest child a letter and then spends a whole paragraph in it critiquing their use of the English language? And what was worse is that I was a graduating English major. My relationship with my mother hasn't always been a cakewalk, but irregardless of our differences, I know she loves me, and I love her. More than the longest letter preceded by the longest phone call, And at the risk of misspelling any words, I just want to say, dear Mom, thanks for everything. You might be really old, like really, really old, but your proofreading and parenting skills are top-notch. Love, your youngest.